like you, my journey into the field of paleo-contact began in the world of theology and the translation of the Bible. And in my work training pastors, I trained them in hermeneutics, the principles of interpreting ancient texts, the Bible in particular. And we would do form criticism. And that's where you look at the text and you say, what kind of literature is this? And you look for clues in the text. And I taught them to do source criticism, where you ask, where did these narratives come from? And you look for clues in the text. And then you bring linguistic questions. What do these words actually mean? And Eric, I've heard you say that there are probably 10 words in the Bible that if you go back to the root meanings, that opens up the whole extraterrestrial aspect of the Bible's story. And my research absolutely agrees with yours.
Of course, I studied languages. I was a deep, deep believer in God. And my father sent me into a Swiss Catholic boarding school, which was led by Jesuits. And in that school, we have to make translations of some parts of the Bible from Latin to Greek and from Greek to German. Now, while translating these books, I read, for example, in the first book of Moses, before the Lord of the Bible descends to the holy mountain, he gives order to Moses to construct a gate around the mountain so that the Israelites would not come close by, otherwise they would be destroyed. So Moses constructs the gate. The Israelites are in safe distance, and then the Lord descends with smoke and fire and trembling, loud noise. In the Bible it even says the mountain looked like a furnace. Now I said to myself, as a 14-year-old boy, why does God, the real God, the spiritual God, first need a gate for protection? God is omnipotent. Why this distance? Why would he say they would be destroyed if they would be closed? The college in which I was studying had a direct connection with the library of the university in the city of Fribourg in Switzerland. So I just had to go to the next door, and I was in the library. And the leader of the library was a Jesuit too. And I told him, your brother told to me I should ask you for the book of Enoch. And he asked me, what do you want to know about Enoch? I said, everything. I know nothing about Enoch. So I received the book of Enoch. Of course, I studied the Enoch in 2 languages. And it's very, very fascinating. But the main thing is, Enoch was taken up to the sky. In religion, they say he was taken up to heaven. There he sees some garden. In the religion, they say, well, he's in the garden of the paradise. In my eyes, now, he's not in the garden of the paradise, he's in the plantation of a mother spaceship. Then he comes to the highest, the room where the highest was sitting, and the highest said, hello. He welcomed Enoch and 2 others. In religion, they said it was the Almighty God. So I said, no, it was not the Almighty God. It was the commander of a spaceship. I saw different things in Enoch with my eyes. They told me in school when I was a boy, Eric, when you live correctly, when you do not harm anybody, when you do not lie, when you do not kill, once when you die, you will come to heaven. Heaven is the place of absolute happiness. Heaven is the place where you are together with the angel. You praise the Lord and so on. Later, as an adult, I learned that heaven was not a place of peace. In heaven, even in our own religion, one day an archangel with the name of Lucifer came and goes to the throne of the Almighty God and says, we don't serve you anymore. Then the Almighty God asked for the Archangel Michael threw Lucifer out of heaven. Heaven was not a place of peace, and this happened in different texts. So I suggested, let's translate the word heaven into space. We have been taught angels were there. Angels are the servants of God. Now, angels are mostly spiritual beings, but these angels, or at least some of them, it depends on the translation. Sometimes they call it the fallen sons of the gods, guardians of the sky. Some of these so-called angels had sex with women, definitely, including in the Bible. And some of these angels also behaved very badly. Sometimes, including in the Bible, in the book of the Kings, the angel destroyed more than 100,000 Babylonians or Sumerians or Assyrians just from the sky. So I suggested, let's translate the word angels into extraterrestrials. Now I have done it with two words. Heaven becomes space. Angels becomes extraterrestrials. Just translate a few of these old keywords with modern interpretation, and you change the meaning of the text.
As you were just saying, if you go back to the root meanings, that opens up the whole extraterrestrial aspect of the Bible's story. But for me, there was one key word, and I took some time out to drill down into the meaning of this word, and it's the word Elohim. It's the original word that gets translated as God in the Bible. There are other words too, but Elohim is the original word translated as God. But when you ask the question, what are the roots of the word? It turns out it means the powerful ones. It is a plural, masculine word. It takes plural verbs, and then it exhibits plural behaviors. You have conflicts among the Elohim. You have the wars of the Elohim, and human beings getting slaughtered in the conflicts of the Elohim. What would happen if we were to reread the Elohim stories, but translate it as the powerful ones? Well, the stories change, but they don't change in a random way. And as I went through that exercise, and I share this journey in Escaping from Eden, I suddenly realized that what we're reading in the Elohim stories is the summary form of the Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian stories on which they're based. The shock horror was to realize that the Sumerian-based stories are not about God at all. The Elohim stories are the stories of the sky people in the Sumerian stories, and they make it very clear that the sky people are extraterrestrials.
Everyone who makes this study deeply comes to the same result. We were visited by beings from outer space some thousands of years ago, and we totally misunderstood. Our ancestors misunderstood the story. So you think the different cultures around the world have in some way or other spoken about the same thing with different misunderstandings?
Absolutely. You can go to almost any country and any culture around the world, and they will have folklore that speaks of a non-human presence on planet Earth, and they'll have stories of visitors from the stars in the deep past. Now, those stories are held in the folklore because very often you'll have the official explanation of things. So you'll have the mainstream scientific view, you might have Christian orthodoxy or the orthodoxy of Islam, but then you get the local stories and you'll discover other explanations. And very often when empire goes in, whether it's Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, British, the indigenous stories, the folklore that remembers those who visited us in the deep past, that's gotten rid of. It's pushed down to the grassroots, and then it's replaced with the mainstream of Christianity and science. And that's happened over and over again through history.
Of course, this is your point of view, your way to see things, your arguments, your indications, and also your proofs is enlightening. That will be the new understanding of our world and our religion. This is exactly a point which I fully agree to 100% with you. Now you talk in your books about abductions. This is a question really I have to you. Why should extraterrestrials abduct some humans? What's the purpose of this?
When I wrote The Scars of Eden, I had no ambition to write a book about ET abductions because I think people really struggle to take it seriously. And yet, as soon as you start listening to world mythology and ancestral narratives, abduction for hybridization is probably the most consistent theme in all those stories, whether you're listening to the stories of the noble people or the other people from out of Ireland, or you're reading the work of Robert Kirk, listening to the indigenous stories of Scotland. I learned of the Mahurani stories from Kenya, the Yamoya stories from the Caribbean, the Dili Ingonato, the Encantos from the Philippines. I learned that the whole of Europe is named after an ET abductee. That's taught us history in Greece. You've got the story of the Greek gods and the Titans. You can go into the Norse countries, Celtic countries, and all the stories repeat. And it's the details that repeat from culture to culture, century to century, cultures that had no contact with each other. When you realize they're all telling the same stories, you have to sit up and listen and realize that the folklore has something important to tell us. They all speak about extraterrestrials hybridizing with us. And it would seem strange. People ask, why would a more advanced species wish to hybridize with us? But I think it's entirely possible that if we start with panspermia, the belief that life in the universe is the rule rather than the exception, that the cosmos has been seeded with the genetic coding for intelligent biological life, you would expect similar life forms to arise on planets with water on them. So we're all somewhat related, but there will be something unique about human beings. I do believe there's something about us that is very special. We've got the blend of animal strength, mammal emotion, higher consciousness, and it gives me an idea of why some of our neighbors might regard human beings as very attractive. That's what Genesis 6 says. They found the humans very attractive, and they want some of our uniqueness, some of our features in their own gene pool. So you go to the stories of the Mamiwata in Ghana, and what they say is that the Mamiwata people want to be more like us. And that is why they are combining our genes with theirs to improve their own species. Just because another species might have better technology doesn't mean they're superior in every way. And that's how I'm beginning to piece together the picture of why some of these abductions may be happening.
Now, this could make us proud. We could say, hey, I'm something special. But at the same time, it makes us very, very humble, because every human is unique. And that might be a reason that the ETs make abductions. They want to know more of this uniqueness of every of our individuals.
In the universe, it might be that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of complete different species. Maybe we have forms of life which we cannot even understand, forms of life on which really a communication is impossible. But there are similar forms of life as we do because of panspermia. At one day, one of these civilizations decided to spread out their own form of life in a certain sector of their Milky Way. You simply infect a section of your Milky Way with your own DNA. And of course you know that the biggest part of this DNA will fall into the gravity of a sun, will be destroyed, or into the gravity of a planet, which is completely wrong for that form of life. But the few of it will come into the gravity of a planet which is similar than the one they started. By the way, NASA says in the meantime more than 4 billions of Earth-like planets must be out there. So and now on this planet evolution starts. I am still a believer in evolution. We are the product of evolution, but not only. Somebody always interfered in our genome. They simply take one cell, they change the code in the cell, they put the cell into a liquid, multiply it, and put it into the womb of a female of the same species. The female will now give birth to the child. Because of this artificial mutation, the child has something which the rest of the family tree has not. The so-called gods created it according to their own image, and it makes all sense. You don't say, we are unique. No, there might be thousands of forms of life out there, but some of them are similar to us, because they are the offsprings of it.
I was amazed to discover Plato. He has his way of talking about panspermia, and then he has this language, these entities who came in our distant past. He called them children of God, and they intervened in our development as species. And he said they adapted us to give us a greater component for consciousness and intelligence. I've heard you express that same story in the language of they gave us curiosity, turned us into a technological species.
If it's intelligent, it has to be curious. If you are not curious, you are not intelligent. Curiosity is like a monster which is in our brain. We can do nothing against curiosity, and curiosity will guide every intelligent form of life into space. Because of curiosity, we see little lights up there, and curiosity forces us to ask, what is this? We have no alternative. We have to go there to find it out, to study it. Curiosity is the monster in our brain who brings every intelligent form of life sooner or later into space.
Why do you think it is so difficult for academic and scientific communities to be seen to take seriously the possibility of previous civilizations or the possibility of ET civilization?
It has to do with our education. In 1956, I think it was, the CIA, the American Secret Service, has given out an order to all its agencies saying every person who makes himself strong for UFOs, so flying saucers, societies who are founded with UFOs, who discuss these things in a serious way, have to be ridiculed. Now, scientists and journalists are normally intelligent and integral personalities, but nobody wants to be ridiculed. Whatever, they are afraid of being ridiculed, so they don't touch the subject of extraterrestrials. I make myself as a fool. They are afraid of it. So it's only this, it's not even a conspiracy. Simply, we are afraid to not be taken seriously, to be ridiculed, and nobody wants it. But the situation changes now slowly and slowly. The spirit of time has changed.
Authors like you are changing what I call the spirit of time, their Zeitgeist. You see, we are changing the spirit of time by our way of thinking, developing and having speeches, etc. Now, what do you think could we do more, you, I, and other colleagues in this field, to change this spirit of time?
Eric, I think you and I and our friends should keep writing books, and we should keep making appearances, because I think it enables people to come to the table. It enables academics to start discussing what this crazy writer has just said, and it enables families and friends to do exactly the same. It's part of the feedback I get. People are delighted they can talk about this with their friends and their families, because here's a book that they know will carry people into the conversation. And I think if we can learn to listen to one another with respect, we will actually begin to hear from our own families stories we've never heard before. I've had friends tell me that they have shown the Scars of Eden to their mum and dad, and all of a sudden they're hearing a story from their parents that is 50 years old that they've never heard before. And the father will say, "Son, let me tell you what happened to me when I was 15 years old." And now they're hearing the story of a close encounter. I think if we can listen to each other, not with ridicule, but with respect, we'll realize that stories of another presence on planet Earth, stories of contact, are far more widespread than we've ever imagined. So whatever we can do to encourage that kind of conversation, I think that's the most important thing.
You see, many authors, as myself, and I think you, authors in this direction, are criticized by the skeptics. Why not? I accept critics, we can react. What is your reaction to the critics, to the skeptics?
Well, Sometimes I get people who come at me with a challenge, or they're just very angry, or they're attacking what I'm saying, or they think I'm debunking the Bible, whereas in fact I'm trying to understand it. And I find 90% of the time, if I listen to what they're saying and respond by saying, well, you've made some good points. The reason I think this is this, this, and this, I find we can have a conversation. And 90% of the time, we're the best of friends by the end of the conversation. So I think critics, very often they'll have something important to bring to the conversation. Sometimes they might bring something, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I will put some more thought to that, and they can finesse our work. But I think the best thing is always that we enter a conversation, and even if it begins as a polarized one, at least we're talking about it. And that's perhaps the most important thing. You broke the taboo, but you got a lot of pushback as well, and a lot of criticism. Did it come from scientists or religious people?
Mostly religious people crashed me down. Later, the scientific community came and said, well, come on, who is he? He was just a waiter, and now he writes a book. And so, what is his scientific background, etc.? So I was criticized, and sometimes the critics were right, and I was wrong. But when we are young, you don't understand this. You have to become a little older, that the critics are also just humans, and some of them are wonderful people. Others of them were not very wonderful, but I was crashed down practically by everyone. First, the critic said, the scientific critic, he says that extraterrestrials exist. We do not know if this is true or not. We have no scientific proof, at least not in 1968. Then he says, if extraterrestrials would really exist, with what technology would they travel these distances of light years? It was not possible in 1968. In the meantime, we see a possibility that you can travel it. Even if Von Däniken would be right, if they would be able to travel, why should they look like us? Extraterrestrials are never human-like. In the evolution on other planets go completely different. So that was all reasonable critics, by the way. And in the meantime, we have answers, reasonable answers for all these points. So the spirit of time slowly changed. In the meantime, many of the critics and I have become good friends. And it's okay, today we can look at it with different eyes, and more and more, even the scientific community says, Erich von Däniken's theories are still speculative, but at least not impossible. He could be on the right way.
One of my favorite Erich von Däniken stories was from the 1970s, when NASA invited you to speak at their administrative facility in Huntsville in Alabama. And in secret, though, they didn't want the world to know NASA was talking to Erich von Däniken, but they invited you to come and speak. And after your lecture, a senior engineer by the name of Joseph Blumrich took you to one side to correct your thinking, so he thought. But something else happened.
I remember it was in a hotel which had the name Courage Inn. And after my speech, by the way, everyone at NASA was there, everyone who had to say something. But we agreed in advance that no part, neither NASA nor I, would go to public. We would not tell that I was speaking there. So after my speech, we had a dinner, and this senior chief engineer, Mr. Joseph Blumrich, came to me and said, Erich, this was quite fascinating, but you mentioned a prophet in the Bible, Ezekiel, and I do not believe that in the Bible you will find anything technology. The Bible, this is spiritual things, stories, maybe fairy tales, dreams, but nothing reality, definitely nothing technological. And he confessed to me he never read the Bible. And he said, because of your speech now, I will do this, and I will control the prophet Ezekiel, which you find in the Old Testament in every Bible. So he did start. The purpose was to disprove me that I was wrong. And then he became more and more fascinated. And he started to calculate, to sit down. Then two other engineers from NASA came to Joe Blumrich's office and asked him, Joe, what are you doing with the Bible on your desk? And he said, this prophet Ezekiel, this is incredible. We can reconstruct. And these men did. They reconstruct phrase by phrase, by the way, the book of Ezekiel in the Bible. And the result was another book with the English title, The Spaceship of Ezekiel. And in the beginning of the foreword, this senior NASA engineer, Dr. Blumley, confessed he was starting this work to disprove me, but he came to a complete different answer, and it was a joy to work together with me.
And I think from Joseph Blumlich's work, where he worked out how the wheels of Ezekiel functioned, I think they used that design on some of the Mars rovers. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have a patent for a wheel, which is used today on Mars, but finally the whole idea for this conception comes from the Bible. So if some of the listeners are descendants of Ezekiel, you should maybe ask for money.
I think that's hilarious. A patent for something in the Bible. That's wonderful.
Your latest book has the title Scars of Eden. What are these scars? What do you mean with it?
Well, the Bible talks about something called the Sky Council. And what that is, it seems to be a committee of extraterrestrial species, different demographics, who all feel they have a stakeholding in Project Earth. And you read the stories of the Bible, or the Sumerian stories, or the Greek stories, or the stories from the Vedas, and it turns out that these ET groups went to war with each other, and they conflicted over how Project Humanity should be managed. When you look at what the conflicts were, they had arguments about how many humans there should be on the planet, how long they should live, what access they should have to knowledge, understanding, information, how conscious they should be, what access to food, water, medication. And as you go through these stories, you realize these are all the same wars that we are fighting today. The powers are still conflicting over the exact same things. Right now, we've got this clash between two models of farming, which is actually, in my view, a clash between two ET cultures that have visited us at different times and set us on different paths. So that's another example. I believe many of our paradigms of leadership were formed in the times when our ancestors were governed over by entities who were more advanced than ourselves. And so we're hardwired to defer to those above us. And you can see that all through human history. So those would be just a few examples of the way paleo-contact has shaped the whole course of human history.
I guess you are familiar that the ex-defense minister of Canada, Mr. Paul Hellyer, said that extraterrestrials are already among us and we could not difference them between normal humans. General Chaim Eshed, who was the chief of Israel's space security program for 27 years, has recently claimed that a government are in contact and there are some kinds of contracts with them. Do you agree? What do you think about this?
I do believe that because it's a very consistent story. When Robert Kirk, a Presbyterian minister in the late 1500s, did his research in Scotland, he reached exactly that conclusion, that not only is there another presence here, they have an influence in human affairs. So it's a very consistent story. And you go right back to the beginning of Christianity, the stories are there of entities influencing human government. I took very seriously the work of Ed Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, who, even while bound by layers of official secrets laws, campaigned for the US government to come clean about being in contact. And he was allowed to say that. And so for all those reasons, yes, I take that claim very seriously. I do believe we are in contact and have been for a very long time.
I knew personally Ed Mitchell. Ed Mitchell was the sixth man on the moon. And Ed Mitchell told me, Eric, I was officially officially informed that extraterrestrials do exist and that we are under control. And I said to Ed Mitchell, what do you mean with officially? You were the sixth man on the moon. Have you seen something up there? I said, Eric, I have never seen a UFO. I said, so what do you mean with officially? He said, Eric, before we started to this trip to the moon, we were 3 astronauts. 3 hours before our starting, the American astronomer Carl Sagan came to us, a very respected astronomer at that time, and he said to us, you are flying now to the moon and back, and it is possible that you see something which you realize immediately, this is not our human technology. You are not allowed to speak, to use words like UFO, extraterrestrials, outsiders. You must always use a code word. I said to Ed Mitchell, what was the code word for you on your trip to the moon? He said, Eric, you won't believe it. The code word was grandma. So it's all crazy.
We're getting some drips of information, though. We now know that there are materials being examined by these government departments. We have film footage we're allowed to see of these anomalous craft. In ancient history, they didn't have film footage, but they did make carvings and they did make sculptures. What are some of the most interesting ones that you've seen from all the things you've seen all around the world?
Well, I was in Terra Dentro in Colombia, and down in Terra Dentro they found tombs of rich Indians. Must be rich because they had a lot of gold objects around their head, necklace, etc. And some of these gold objects, they look like little aircraft.
The morphology is very clear. The shape of the wings is clear. You've got the cockpit that you could see. There's a vertical tail. There's no kind of insect as one of those.
It could not have been an insect. You know, insect for these people thousands of years ago was something which harms you. Insect was nothing holy, nothing high. You would never make insects in pure gold. If you make something in pure gold, because you adore it, it has to do something with the gods. Now these objects, they really look like aircrafts. And there are difference of them. They were found in Terra Dentro in Colombia, including some of the heads with helmets which the natives had not. The Stone Age people never had helmets on. Also in Central America, Colombia, South America. But you found some of these helmets in Terra Dentro. So the world is fascinating. We are learning more and more, and slowly the spirit of time, their zeitgeist, will change.
Now, I'll give you one example from my own family. I was preparing for my book, Escaping from Eden, to come out, and I suddenly remembered, oh my goodness, my parents-in-law are going to read this book. And they are devout Christian believers. They are Baptists, Pentecostals, and they're from Ghana. And I thought, I have to prepare them for this book because they could be shocked, they could be offended, and I do want to stay their son-in-law. So they came and visited one weekend, and we had some wonderful food and some wonderful wine. And when everyone was relaxed, I said, Kofi, patience, let me tell you about this book that's coming out. And I explained to them everything I've just said to you, Eric, and I had no idea how they were going to react. Well, when I paused for breath and I'd explained what the book was, my father-in-law, Kofi, sat back in his chair and he said, Paul, a penny has dropped. Because all the things that didn't make sense in the old Bible stories suddenly made sense. Suddenly he realized we're reading the stories of ETs, not God's stories in some of the old stories. And then my mother-in-law, Patience, said, to my total surprise, Paul, we already know this story. Because in Ghana, at school, you were taught the modern scientific view, you were taught Christianity, but we in Ghana have known for generations of a non-human presence on planet Earth. And she told me the Mami Water stories from out of Ghana. And it is stories of contact with other species.
By the way, I had a similar experience. When Chariots of the Gods came on the market, I was afraid to present my own book to my parents, who were absolutely Catholics. Finally, I did it. And my father looked at me and said, Eric, but you don't lose God. You still believe in God. I say, of course, Daddy. God is all over, omnipotent. God is the almighty universe. God is whatever. You never lose God.
My belief is exactly the same as yours. I still have my faith in God. And I should say I wasn't worried about my own parents because it was they who introduced me to your work when I was 11 years old.
Are you still working sometimes in churches?
All my pastoral work is one-on-one. As soon as we're let out of our houses again, I hope I will be doing some meetings in churches as well.
Paul Wallis, you are a very intelligent and a clever personality. I have full respect with you. Everyone can understand you, and you have a way to speak and to tell it in a way that everyone understands it.
Thank you, Eric. You really have changed the zeitgeist, and I want to thank you so much for doing that pioneering work. Thank you for blazing that trail. Thank you for your courage.
Paul Wallis, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Hope to see you sooner or later again.
Thank you, Eric. I hope so too.
God bless you. Bye-bye. It was a pleasure. Ciao, Paul.
God bless. Thank you for joining me today on the Paul Wallis channel. Remember to subscribe and click on the bell for notifications. For a full 2 hours of myself in conversation with Erich von Däniken, you can go to the Erich von Däniken podcast on YouTube and FB, and also you can go to The Fifth Kind TV.